Hello, my name is Andy Jocelyn, and I'm here on behalf of Parade Rest in the Library of Congress with John Beahm for this interview in Nokesville, Virginia on the 24th of June, 2015. Also present is Tyler Leistash on the camera and John Beam's daughter, Janice Mayhew. And we're going to be here talking about Mr. Mayhew's experiences in World War II. So, sir, can I have you state your full name, your highest rank, and your birthday?
My name is John Robert Beahm. I was born August the 28th, 1920. And what other information?
Your highest rank that you received in the military.
I eventually wound up as a master sergeant.
Perfect. Where were you born, sir?
I was born in the heart of Nokesville, Virginia, Prince William County.
Perfect.
Virginia.
How far away is that from where we sit right now?
Half a mile.
Excellent. And did you go to high school here in Prince William County, did I take it?
Oh yes, I went to high school at Nokesville, Virginia. The school was Brentsville District High School.
Right. And were you able to graduate before going into the service?
Oh yes, I graduated in 1938, and it was 4 years later that I went into the service.
Got it. And how many people were in your graduating class?
20.
20.
That was the biggest graduating class up to that point because the high school was just started in 1929. First graduating class was 1930, yes.
Excellent. And how many were you one of many children, or did you have brothers and sisters?
I had 3 brothers, 4 sisters. I was number 7 in the lineup. I have 1 younger sister, and she's still living. And all the rest of my siblings died in their 90s.
Wow. Wow. And what did your folks do?
Well, my dad was a school teacher, a minister, but he made a little more farming than he did at those other trades.
Excellent. And what did you think your prospects were when you graduated high school? Did you graduate before the war started?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The war started in December of 41. I graduated in 38. War clouds were hanging over Europe at the time I graduated, but Europe seemed a long way off then. We didn't pay much attention.
Right. And so were you planning to go into a trade or go to college, or?
We were dirt poor. I didn't seek college at all. But I did finally borrow money from an older sister and went to Bridgewater College. I went there 1 year and I couldn't borrow money from anybody anymore. And that's when I went to Washington and got a job, like most people in this community. So many of them would go to Washington and find work as policemen, firemen, some kind of clerical work. So that's where I wound up, and I worked at the FBI as a tour leader and a file clerk. And I went to night school and got the equivalent of 1 more year of college.
Right. What was working at the FBI like?
It was real work. You probably heard a lot of negative stuff about J. Edgar Hoover, but he was a great director at the FBI, and we really worked. There's no goofing off around there. And the best part I liked about it was being a tour leader. I had a young, strong voice then and a good memory, so I thought I was pretty good directing tours.
Excellent.
I'm so modest.
And was the tours just for the public to come learn what the FBI did?
Tourists would come to Washington, and a lot of them would want to go to the FBI because it had built a great reputation by then. In the early 30s, there was Ma Barker and her boys were real criminals. John Dillinger was a very bad man. Babyface Nelson. It was a real crime era in the early 30s, and the FBI pretty much erased all that. And I would talk about that.
Right.
And a lot of other things.
Right. So, were you in Washington when you had heard about the attacks on Pearl Harbor?
No, I was on a weekend, on Sunday, and my brother and I had gone up to a farm where they had about 4 or 5 eligible girls, and we didn't have any one of them as a girlfriend, but we'd go up there and sing and have a good time with them. And when I came home from that place, they said that I'd gotten a telephone call from the FBI, come to work immediately. And so we had bus service in Nokesville. I got on the bus and went to Washington, went directly to the FBI, started working. Worked all night up until 5 o'clock. Went home and had a little breakfast and showered, went right back to work. And incidentally, that was overtime that I never saw any pay for.
What was the FBI's priority at that time on that first day? What were they trying to?
They were trying to find out who all the Japanese were that they had on record. And they were the ones that were gathered up and put in a concentration camp. They weren't necessarily bad, and they weren't. But, you know, it was really scary. We thought that the Japanese, that their next move would be to invade the West Coast, and probably simultaneously Hitler would hit us on the East Coast. We were scared.
Yeah.
But neither of those things happened.
Right.
Not yet.
Well, so were you with the FBI for the first few years of the war?
Yes, I was.
Right. And what was the mood at the FBI for that, you know, moving forward and the first few years of the war? What was that like? What was
The mood?
Yeah, what was the mood? What was the mission for the FBI beyond those first few days?
Well, it was a changed mood. Some of the male clerks left almost immediately. They wanted to get in the Air Corps, most of them. And others just wanted to get in the Army. There was a great spirit of loyalty and patriotism. I don't know of anybody that tried to dodge going into the Army from the FBI.
Right.
Now here at Nokesville, boys who were farmers, they decided, well, I think I'll just keep on farming. And that did keep them out of the service.
Right. Interesting. In terms of your job at the FBI, did that change at all too? With the coming of war?
Not really. Not really.
Got it. So when was that point at which you were asked to join the service?
When was it?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Well, the first part of 1940, was it 42 or 43?
I think here we had 43 was the
Yeah, 43. In fact, I was taking 9 hours of law because as a clerk at the FBI, if I could get 30 hours of law, I could qualify to become a special agent. Well, I didn't quite finish my 9 hours before I had to leave.
Right.
And I never went back.
Right.
I could have.
Right. Do you remember what you were feeling when you got that letter that you had been drafted?
Well, I was expecting it, so I wasn't shocked or upset or anything. And my dad, he was a lot older than I was. He says, Robert, is there any honorable way you can keep from going to the Army? Because you know our church is a peace church, one of the 3 peace churches. And I wish we wouldn't have to go to the Army. I said, Papa, I think I need to go. And that was the end of that.
Right. Did any of your siblings serve?
My next older brother was called up twice, and he has such bad feet that he couldn't pass the physical. So he was sent back home. He was 7.5 years older than I was, and he was living at home. My parents were getting old, and he pretty much looked out for them.
Got it. So when you were drafted, where did you go from there?
Well, I was at Camp Lee. Got my uniform, took all those tests, and put with a bunch of guys I'd never seen before. Got on a train, went to Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. And that's where I took my basic training. And I've told you a little something about that.
Yeah. Would you mind telling me again for the camera here what some of those folks you met in basic were, and
Well,
who were your friends?
There were types of people that I hadn't met or lived with or worked with. One was a group of coal miners from Pennsylvania. They were very quiet, well-behaved, hard-working. And the other half was what we call the dead-end boys from Philadelphia. And they lived on the street and they were rough as a cob. I tell you, they were rough. Young, hadn't been properly raised.
What kind of trouble would they get into? Would they?
Well, being in the Army, they didn't get in too much trouble.
Right.
But the first time we sat down at a meal, it was family style. Long tables with built-in benches, and had dish after dish of mashed potatoes. and other food. And one guy across the table reached for a spoon and took it and started to dig into the mashed potatoes. And one of those boys took a fork and tried to get his hand. I mean, he really tried. I thought, what kind of animals are these? So that's what I lived with for 6 weeks of basic training.
Right. And you were telling me that someone came to you in basic training and said they needed a typist. Is that correct?
Say that again?
You were saying that someone came to you and said they needed a typist?
Oh yeah, somebody from headquarters at the camp. He needed a typist, and so the first sergeant went through all the records and found out I was a typist, and I was chosen to go to headquarters. And my company was chosen to go to the Pacific Theater. And I have to tell you this, it sounds like bragging, but you know what an obstacle course is?
Yes, sir.
Where you climb high walls and jump over ditches and crawl through culverts and, well, I did that, and I went back, reported to the lieutenant after I'd done all that. He says, he cussed a little, he said, you know what? Nobody's ever done it that fast.
Wow.
I just throw that in because it's the only thing I got to brag about.
That's excellent. So what you said that the folks you knew went to the Pacific. Or what was in future? What was the future for you after working at the camp? What happened next?
Regarding my work?
Regarding your work and your service, where did you go from there?
Well, I kind of got into administration work other than typing, and became a staff sergeant. And I did that kind of work for about a year right there at Camp Claiborne. And then this company, 1190th Engineer Base Depot Company, was formed, and I was selected by the colonel, so I was told, along with 58 other enlisted men.
Right.
And the company consisted of 59 enlisted men, 2 warrant officers, and 11 officers. There was a lot of rank in there. It was quite a company.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all good guys, nice to get along with and live with.
Right. Was that where you met those friends you were telling me about before, the George Washington graduate? You were telling me about a friend that graduated from George Washington.
They were the 2 men in the company in which I took basic training.
Ah, okay.
They were regular people, type that I had lived around all my life. Everybody else was different. The coal miners and the dead end kids.
Right. Okay. Got it. And what was the basis for your selection for the engineer corps? Did you have to take a test, an aptitude test that?
Well, I took the test because everybody was taking it. And then when I went before the officer the next day, and he said, "What branch of the service would you like?" I said, "Well, I believe I would like the medical corps." He says, "Forget it. With a high grade like you got on it." And that is a joke because I'm not mechanical. With that kind of grade, you're automatically in the Corps of Engineers. That's the way it was.
Excellent. So, when was your first deployment? Do you remember?
What type of appointment?
Deployment. Once you got into the Corps, where did you go from there?
Our company took another basic training at Camp Claiborne, and most of us went home on furlough to kind of be ready for the next move. And we knew we were going to be going overseas soon. Well, I was at home, and when I went downstairs on June the 6th, my family told me, says, the invasion's already happened. It happened during the night while I was sleeping. They went on to Utah Beach and Omaha Beach into France. And I had personal friends that were in that. And they were really messed up. And I missed it. But I was well, and so I got a telegram, don't report back to Camp Claiborne, report back to Granite City, Illinois, to finish your training. And that's across the river from St. Louis.
Right.
So I got on the train and went to St. Louis and got off the train, and I thought, well, there's a YMCA. I believe I'll go in there before I go to Granite City. And there's a whole bunch of guys swimming in the nude. It was always a men's building, you know.
Right.
So I took a swim too, and got something to eat, and then went across the Mississippi River to Granite City, and saw some of the guys I knew, and we were there for about 3 months. And then a train pulled right into the camp. We got on it, went to New York,
Wow.
New York City. It was a nice ride. We went through the upper part of New York State. Of course, it was middle of the night when we got to New York, and we had a full pack, field pack on, which weighed about 40 pounds, carrying a carbine rifle, and a duffel bag. It was stuffed full, and heaven knows how much that might have cost, weighed. Mm-hmm. We were overburdened. And we went in on a lower level, and they don't call them stairs, they call them something else when you're on the ocean. We went up to an upper deck, another deck, carrying all that stuff. And we all made it, went to the top deck, and our company was put in what had been the library of the Aquitanium.
Wow.
And for your information, the Aquitanium was the third largest ship in the British Navy. The two queens, Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, were larger, but the Aquitania was the third. And there were 600 troops, 6,000 troops on that ship after we went on it.
Wow.
And we didn't go by convoy. We went solo. Smaller ships would go together, 6, 8, or 10, and if one of them was torpedoed, the others were there to help. But they figured the Aquitania was fast enough, and it zigzagged across. They didn't think that there was too much danger. But we all had our fingers crossed, really.
Right.
And we made it safely to Glasgow, Scotland.
Right.
You want me to keep going?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Well, before noon, we were on a troop train headed south to Southampton, England. And that was for me, it was a pretty thrilling thing. We saw English countryside that I'd heard about and never seen before. They kept everything so neat and so well taken care of. That didn't happen all the time in this country. There's a lot of ugly things.
Yeah.
But that was pretty all the way. And at London, we had a layover of about 30 or 40 minutes. And we got off the train, and at that time, what were those bombs called?
The buzz bombs or
V?
V2s, maybe?
I'm not sure, but
The rockets?
we heard those bombs, whistling down, and we hear the big boom. London was still getting a lot of bombs from the Germans.
Right.
And a bunch of Red Cross ladies was there to feed us company cookies and give us some cocoa to drink.
Right.
And then it was back on the train, and sun up the next morning, we hit Southampton, and it was beautiful, the sun coming up over the English Channel. Want me to go on?
Yeah. Well, can I just ask a couple questions about?
Sure.
Yeah. So, did you have much interaction with the English people? What were your impressions of the people of England at the time?
Well, we didn't mingle with them. We were riding.
Right. And I assume there were a lot of troops at that time. Just your whole unit moving together, right?
I don't know if there was another company on the train or not, but all of our company was on the train.
Got it. And what was the sentiment of the guys with you? Were they all excited to go, or scared, or?
Well, we were kind of looking forward to things. France had been liberated,
Right.
and it was safe, we thought, to be in France. But we were warned that not to get too confident, that they could still drop some bombs on us. And we were put on a small ship that was had a crew of Indians from India. Couldn't communicate with them at all.
Wow.
And the food was horrible. Horrible, absolutely. And the weather was rough, and at that point, I think the English Channel was about 18 or 20 miles wide, and we got to the other side, and the water was too rough to get off the ship. So we were stuck for 5 days on that bobbing ship.
Wow.
And some of the guys got pretty seasick.
Did you get seasick?
I was on water many weeks and months, and I never got seasick.
Wow.
I was about the only one in the company who didn't, and I don't know why. I almost got sick watching the others.
Wow.
They just vomit and vomit,
Ugh.
but I've never been seasick.
I have, and it's terrible. Right. So where did you land in France? Eventually, once you landed, where in France
We
were you
landed at Utah Beach,
Right.
and incidentally, when we finally got on an LST to be carried to the shore, well, we had to be careful. We went down a rope ladder, and from there we jumped on to LST, but we were told be sure to wait till it gets up, and as it starts going down again, jump. Of all people, the colonel didn't do it right. He jumped on it when it was coming up and broke his ankle.
Oh no.
Excuse me.
That's okay.
So we were stuck there. Nobody was there to take us to Paris. We were supposed to go to Paris before being assigned. And we went ashore there at Utah Beach and pitched our tents. 2 men to a tent. Each of us carried a half of a pup tent. And a little story along with that. We all wanted to stay on higher ground in case of rain. Well, after we got the pup tents pitched, the first sergeant of the company says, you gotta line those things up. Well, if we did that, somebody had to be on the low ground. And don't you know, we had a cloud burst that night, and the poor guys that were on low ground, these got soaked.
Oh no.
And we didn't, we had taken some K rations with us, and we finished them up the next day. And after that, we had no food and no way to get to Paris. And about the second day, no, third day, there's a bunch of Red Cross women debarked at Utah Beach, and we said hi to them, and they had a whole bunch of weapons carriers to pick them up. So we made a deal with them to ride with them to Paris.
Oh, okay.
Some of our guys did the driving and handle their luggage and our equipment, duffel bags and so on. So that's the way we got to Paris. That night we drove, but couldn't use headlights. Weapons carriers had tiny little lights in front that shone down onto the road, and that's the way we went to Paris.
That sounds like a pretty nice convoy, all things considered.
And you've heard of Saint Lo. It was torn up completely. We went through that on a moonlight night and saw all the damage. Got to Paris. We went to a hotel, and first thing we got was a real meal. Oh, and we were starving. We were.
Yeah.
And that night we slept on clean sheets in it must have been one of the nicest hotels in Paris.
Wow.
But you know, Parisians and everybody in France welcomed us just like we had saved their lives. They were real nice, real nice.
That's excellent.
And so we were stuck in Paris, if you can imagine that, for 6 weeks. And we went to the barracks that the Germans had lived in. But we had the freedom during the day to tour Paris. And we did. I wouldn't have ever toured it any other way.
Wow. That's excellent.
And from there we went to on a train to Marseille, and then went on trucks to a point 18 miles north of Marseille. And we were set up for business pretty soon. What we did, I was in administration and wasn't a part of this, but equipment and supplies would be unloaded at Marseille, put on barges, and they were brought to where we were on barges that were on the canals wide or wider than a football field. Great big canal.
Wow.
And our guys received that stuff and put it on trucks and hauled it to the front. And that was a continuous thing.
Right.
But I was with the colonel and the adjutant and the executive officer and a bunch of GIs with a little lower rank than I was, in a building that had been a slaughterhouse, but it was well built, 3 stories, had a wide ramp that went up two sides, and we were told that they'd drive cattle, sheep, hogs up that ramp, start butchering them on the top floor, and process them on the way down to the first floor. And that was interesting to me because I'd been around butchering a lot. And so that was headquarters for the whole operation, that building.
Right. And what was your specific role while you were there? Were you administrative or?
I was. We had a guy that was a sergeant who was 39 years old, and I was working under him. But he got right away. He got into drinking wine, and he wasn't worth a darn. So I was doing his work. And one day, Colonel Woods, he was the new colonel, called me into his office. He says, "Sergeant Beahm, I want you to make yourself a master sergeant." Because Sergeant Talbot is about to go home, and you'll be head man. I says, "Well, Colonel, don't you know, tech sergeant comes ahead of master sergeant?" I was a staff sergeant. I said, "Do you mean to make me a tech sergeant?" He says, he cussed a little, he kind of grinned. He says, "I'm running this outfit." And I was in charge of the special orders every day. Nobody else could write things to make sense, but I could. So I promoted myself.
Excellent.
And I became a master sergeant for the rest of for the duration.
Got it. And so, can you walk me through what a day would be like? In their operation, what would it look like?
Well, our building had a message center. Where different. We had 8 companies attached to us, and they'd send information into the message center. They wanted to inform other companies of something, and of course we had telephone service.
Was it pretty reliable? By the time you
It worked.
Yeah.
And I was on the telephone so much dealing with first sergeants of those companies because, as you would guess, we had to get all kinds of reports in every day. And that was one of the toughest jobs I had. And first sergeants, I outranked them, but I'm not the kind of guy that enjoys being in charge, but I had to make myself be that way. I had to talk rough to some of those first sergeants, and I got results. And if they got too smart, I'd say, well, let me go talk to the colonel, and then they'd soften up. Yeah, the colonel was almost a friend of mine. He was a good egg.
Right.
And might I tell you of another incident there?
Sure.
There were about 4 of us pretty much on an equal footing, although I was the top dog. And we'd take turns opening that office in the morning. And in order to get up on time, we'd take the only alarm clock that we had there in the building, take it to the barracks so we could get up in time. Well, one day when my turn was, I picked up that alarm clock and started to the barracks, probably a quarter of a mile away. And we had Senegalese soldiers guarding the place. A Senegalese soldier was short if he was short of 6'2". They were all about 6'4", 6'5", 6 feet, 6'6" tall.
Wow.
Very tall black men. Well, I was carrying this alarm clock, and all of a sudden, right in front of me was this great big Senegalese soldier with a muzzle of the rifle right in my face. And he was pointing at the alarm clock. and I pointed back to where the colonel was, indicating, let's go back there. Well, he finally caught on. We went back. Colonel Woods saw me with that rifle on me, and he started laughing. That guy could have shot me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the closest I ever came to being shot.
Excellent. Well, if it's okay with you, maybe we'll take a little break before we go to the next step. We'll put a little pause on the video and check on how things are going.
Okay, maybe I'll get my voice back.
All right, we're just coming back from a short break, and we were going to talk a little bit about some experiences on Omaha Beach.
I had a good friend in high school named James Morris. He was a short fella, but strong, stocky, and a heck of a boxer. He'd gone to Cornell University and was on the boxing team there. He had a great sense of humor. I always enjoyed talking with him. Well, he was in the paratroopers. And the night of the invasion, he jumped into a field over France. And he was carrying 80 pounds of telephone equipment. 80 pounds. And he broke his hip when he landed. And the Germans found him. And he didn't get, they put him in a hospital, but he didn't get any surgery or anything. And he actually didn't get out of that hospital until the Arab army, our soldiers found him. And he got pretty good surgery, but he always crippled after that. And I think it shortened his life because he was my age and he's been gone now for, I guess, 35 or 40 years. And another friend, Ralph Rollins, was one of those that was on a LSD that was take them to shore. But it seems that so many of those guys that controlled the LSDs failed to go all the way to shore. They were chicken. They didn't want to get too close to shore. Well, Ralph told me later he survived, but he was really injured. He said the first guys off the LSD were in deep water, and they just went right on down. And we, the rest of us, we kind of walk over top of them, and they held them underwater. He says that was a pitiful, awful thing. And anyhow, he survived it, but it worked on him psychologically. As he got older, he'd never go to bed. He'd always crawl into the bed to go to sleep. And I played sports with him. He was a very normal fella, but that's what the war did to him.
Yeah. When you were saying what was the scene like when you landed personally on Omaha after the battle? Could you still see some of the remnants of what had happened?
Well, I took note of all those pillboxes, and things looked pretty normal. You see, it had been several months, and things had been cleaned up. There were no dead soldiers.
Okay. Well, let's go back. When we left before the break, we were in Marseille. Did you travel anywhere from there in Europe, or what was your next move after going from Marseille?
Well, a little bit about Marseille after the war ended. There was a big parade, and everybody was happy and celebrating. And what our first sergeant did, he was kind of a go-getter, Sergeant Gurian. He was a Jewish man, and he could get things done. He rented a what do I want to say, Janice?
Villa,
Villa, and right on the Mediterranean Sea,
Wow.
and that was ours to use as we pleased. Had a house and everything. We could change clothes, and we'd go out there and take turns, about 12, 15 of us at a time. And I'll declare that water was so clear, you could see the bottom, which was probably 40 feet down.
Wow.
But we went swimming in there, and nobody drowned yet. And then the time came when we had orders to board the ship in Marseille and head for Philippine Islands.
Wow. So, were you ready to go on another mission, or did you want to?
Well, didn't have any choice.
Right. Yeah.
But that would be something different. And we've all felt like the Japanese wouldn't hold out but so much longer. And so we looked forward to it. And we were put on a ship, a luxury liner. And non-commissioned officers had staterooms.
Wow.
Oh, we were living high. And a thing that some of us liked, there were about 10 of us that were pretty good singers. The chaplain happened to be a musician. And he got singers together, and we'd practice and have a good time harmonizing. And on Sunday, during the church service, and that was the first time I had a chance to go to church since I'd been in the Army. Went to church there on the ship, and we sang special music. And it was my first introduction to frozen food. That ship had fresh meat, and I was wondering why I hadn't joined the Navy. It was really
Good meals.
really nice.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just like the Liberty ship that Kaiser made so many of. It was a real ocean liner.
Nice.
And we didn't have anything to do. Well, I had to make out a morning report that took at least 5 minutes every day. And the food was good, and we'd do a lot of singing. We had a group within the company that had performed well enough that we sang at the officers' get-togethers. And
did you have a band name or anything? A group name?
I guess we just called ourselves the 1190 Singers. We had a pretty good attitude and a lot of loyalty toward our company. And one of the guys put words suitable to the music of some college songs, and we'd sing those songs. Like 1190, hail to you, with your colors coming through, and all that stuff. It helped morale.
Yeah. About that, I don't have much of an idea of the time it takes to sail across the ocean. How long did it take to get from the Atlantic to? Did you go through the Panama
We
Canal?
had to go through the Panama Canal. The Suez was entirely too dangerous. That would have been a shorter route, but we went through the Panama Canal, and Janice was. It figured out about 2 months from. I kept a kind of a journal part of the time, and Janice found it.
That's when they left Merced. And it has a,
About the first week of July to the last week of August.
Right. Oh, perfect. That's excellent. So was it? Sounds like it was the middle of summer. Was it hot aboard ships on the way over?
We had air conditioning.
Oh, right. It was a luxury line.
Oh, yeah. But we'd go out on the deck and I don't know where we ever got sunglasses, but we lived like millionaires there for a while.
That's excellent. So you went through the Panama Canal. Did you stop anywhere on the way across the Pacific Ocean?
We spent one night at Pearl Harbor, but we had to stay on board ship. Unless we had a family member stationed there, and there's one of our guys did get to leave the ship to see his brother.
Excellent.
But we saw exactly how the Panama Canal operated. The locks, and it was sectioned off, and the Pacific, I guess, is a lot higher than the Atlantic, and you had to make that change over going through the canal, and it worked.
That must have been pretty interesting to a whole ship full of engineers.
Yeah, we were engineers, Artie. There wasn't one in the company that had an engineer degree.
Wow. Excellent. So from Pearl Harbor, where did you go next?
Well, we kept going west, and 2 days beyond Pearl Harbor, they dropped the big bomb in Japan, and that was the end of the war. And we kept thinking, why don't they turn around and take us back to the States? But it didn't happen. We kept going over to become occupation troops. And we docked at Manila about midnight and went from there to a gondola, got on a railroad car, gondola. They're the ones that have high sides, I don't know, I would say 5 feet high, but it was open otherwise. So we all rode on one of those great big gondolas, and wouldn't you know, a storm came up and we got soaked, but it was warm. We didn't get cold. And we went to a point close to Clark Field to get off and go to a staging area. It was full of tents. That's where we were to spend some time. And we had to walk. Did you see how far it was? In about 2 miles.
is in there.
Oh, yeah. So it was a long walk, was it?
Long walk
Yeah.
and hot. Oh,
Hot.
man, it was hot.
Yeah.
And you know, the people that fell by the wayside, we saw them in the ditches. Great big men that just couldn't make it. And we were carrying as much load as they were. But all of our guys made it, walking to the staging area. And we had time to kill in the staging area. That's where I became 20, 25 years old.
Ah, okay. So did you have a birthday party there in the staging area?
No party. No party. I didn't know what a party was. I do recall that they had some bright news all silver coins out, and with my pocket knife I carved two rings, silver rings. You know, you can shave that almost pure silver.
Right.
I had to have something to do. And then I was told that 10 of us were going to, including me, would be sent by plane to Japan as a advance party. Well, an awful typhoon happened before we were to leave, and some of our planes were lost during that typhoon, really. And we didn't go as an advance party. We went on an LST, the biggest LST. It had heavy equipment like bulldozers at the bottom, and our company was we were the only soldiers aboard the LST, and it was a long thing, and you could stand down in the bottom of it and look the length of it and see it flex.
Wow.
And some of those waves, I know they were 40 or 50 feet high. In the wake of the typhoon, the water was rough. And there again, about everybody started throwing up. I don't think anybody could eat except for one or two other people besides me survived it pretty well. But I began to think there was something wrong with me. I didn't get seasick. But I was so glad.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, that was awful seeing them that sick.
Yeah. I wanted to take a step back and just ask you what the mood was when you found out the war was over, and just what the sentiment of the guys was.
Oh, we were overjoyed.
Yeah.
We were overjoyed, and actually, we thought we were going to come back home, because within a half hour after we got that news, our ship made a circle. When it started that circle, we thought, well, we're going back to the States.
Right.
And it made a complete circle.
Oh, no.
And went on the track again to the Philippines.
Right. Right. And one question we've been asking of all of the veterans is what were your feelings when you heard about that bomb that was dropped? Was there any feeling of shock, or did you know about it, or?
Well, we anticipated something like that might happen.
Yeah.
But we didn't know anything. But it wasn't all joy, because we thought of how awful it was on the Japanese people. Japanese soldiers were easy to dislike because they did some mighty bad things. But Japanese civilians weren't part of the war, really. and they were killed by the thousands.
And
Yeah, we debarked at Yokohama. Yokohama is about 25 miles from say the name of the
Hiroshima, Nagasaki.
here's Hiroshima or Nagasaki where the bombs were dropped, or
no the
Tokyo?
Tokyo.
Yeah.
I had a blood infection that affected my memory a little bit.
Sure.
I'll apologize
That's
for
okay.
that.
No need for it.
And we were put to work when we got to Japan. I was put with an adjutant, and I didn't do much work. He didn't either. But he was the biggest boned, biggest framed man I ever saw. He just looked like a freak almost. He was massive. He wasn't very tall, but his hands and arms and legs were twice as big as anybody else. That's beside the point, I know, but I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
And this was in the fall, and the different high-ranking officers got together. Most of them were chaplains, I think, and planned a special religious Christmas service. And they used one of the biggest theaters in Tokyo for that. And our company was a part of it. And it was done so effectively that, and with the war ending and thoughts of going home, it was very emotional. And more than one person was shedding tears. And after that, I was slated to come back home. And I got home on the 22nd of February. But it was not a pleasant journey. We were on one of those cheap Henry Kaiser ships.
Right. No more luxury liners.
We were in the hold. It was a great big open space, and they had bunks for us hanging from the ceiling. It went up about 10 or 12. You had to climb up on the bunks to get to your bunk. But on the way home, I didn't complain.
Could I ask you just what your before we go to that journey, what was your impression of the Japanese country, the countryside, the people?
Well, it was a little like England. It was clean and well kept. The fields looked all clean, yet no weeds or trash. And we had the freedom to take a weapons carrier and go anywhere we wanted in Japan. And about 5 or 6 of us together did a lot of traveling. And we were right next to Mount Fuji. It looked like it was right there in front of us, but it was a little distance away. And the people fell over backwards being nice to us. And the sergeant somehow managed to get two Kwanzaa huts put up, one right against the other, so our whole company was in the same building. And what that guy did, he went out and got a barber to come in and shave us. He brought a barber's chair and everything, put it in the barracks. And I thought, I'll be dogged if I'm going to let a Japanese shave me. He used a straight razor,
Right.
but I did get a haircut.
Right. Wow. Okay, so we were on the trip home. Where was your port that you landed in? What was the American?
San Francisco.
San Francisco. Yeah.
Well, we all during the time we were together in the Army, we kept saying, looking forward to Golden Gate in '48. Well, we didn't wait that long. We saw the Golden Gate. I did ahead of that time, but I wasn't within any of my original buddies on that ship. I had new buddies, and that ship finally made it to San Francisco, and we went to Bakersfield, spent the night, got a good meal. Bakersfield is an Air Force
Base or installation.
installation, yeah. And the next day a train came right into camp, and whole bunch of us got aboard. And I had learned to know two or three guys, but we were coming all from there to Camp Meade, Maryland. Fort Meade, isn't it? Fort Meade.
Fort Meade, right.
And that was the longest train ride. At different points, the train would stop in a town and the engine would leave. In Waterloo, Iowa, early Sunday morning, the engine left us, and we ran all over Waterloo, Iowa. But being Sunday, the only stores open were drug stores. But we just bought stuff like we had money. Yeah, it was a different world already.
Yeah.
Ask him about phoning. How many phone calls he
What'd you say?
She asked me to ask you about phone calls. How many phone calls did you have?
I didn't call anybody except when I was in St. Louis before I went overseas. I called my niece. She was about 3 years old. And a fellow named Tyler was my friend. He was with me. He was from Texas. And he had a southern drawl. And I talked to my niece, Barbara. And my brother, older brother, said she wore that record out. She'd play it time and time again just to hear us talk. Well, he called home that time. And when I got to Bakersfield, I went to a phone booth and called home. And my mother answered, and I says, "Mom, I'm in the United States, and I'll be home. I don't know when, but it might be within a week or so." And that's the one call home I made.
And I meant to ask you before. You mentioned a couple of rings you made. You mentioned the rings you made from the silver coins. Was one of the rings for someone special?
No. You know where I keep that ring? Those rings? In that ONT thing on top of the 5-drawer dresser.
Okay.
Look in one of those little drawers.
And he bought silk for his bride to make.
Yeah, right. You bought. She was saying something about silk.
Oh yeah. There's one guy that was a wheeler dealer. He had been in the insurance business before he went in the Army. His name was Tiley. Last name was Tiley. And he liked to go out and take a carton of cigarettes and buy things with those cigarettes.
Right.
And cigarettes were 50 cents a carton. So I bought some cigarettes and I gave him a carton. I says, would you go out and buy me some silk and a kimono? And he did. And that kimono wound up with my wife, my new wife, and she was a great seamstress even as a girl. She used that silk in making her wedding dress.
Is that it?
Yeah, the inside isn't exactly smooth, but I didn't think you'd find it. But that's it.
Hold that up to the camera. We'll hold it up to the camera at the end. Yeah. So, did you correspond with your bride-to-be throughout the war?
No, she was just a young kid.
Ah, okay.
I courted her 2 years before I married her at 19. Well, I was almost 28.
Wow. Okay.
But it worked. We were very compatible. Got along fine. And had one baby after another.
Yeah. So was it difficult to reintegrate into the civilian world after you came back?
In some ways, yeah. We used to make jokes in the Army. Says, now don't forget yourself and go out in the garden and dig a foxhole. Well, actually, our company never did dig foxholes. But a lot of them did. And watch your language. Language in the Army was a little rougher than it is in civilian life.
Right.
More than a little.
Yeah. So what was your plan? Did you go into a field at that time, or for work, or what were you trying to do after the war?
Well, I'd already talked to my dad about it. He was giving up on farming, and so I just took over the farm. And my brother, who was a rural letter carrier, we formed a kind of partnership, 33 1/3, 67 2/3. I did most of the work and he did a lot of it and helped manage.
Mm-hmm.
He was 7.5 years older than I was. We raised pigs and sold them, milked cows and sold cream, separated, sold cream, and sold some of the grain that we raised. And then I let up on he got married to a girl close to Roanoke, left me. So I was solo farming for quite a while. But like I say, I was happy. I was home, had a wife, we were having children, and I was out of the Army.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. As we come to a close, are there any stories you remember? If you want to take a moment and think about if there's any stories you remember that you'd like to.
Well, I just had to tell you about breaking the obstacle course record.
That was excellent.
How about Dr. Miller?
Huh?
Dr. Miller.
Dr. Miller? Story
Dr. Miller, the eyeglass, Culpeper.
Culpeper eyeglass?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I had an optometrist in Culpeper, learned to know him pretty well, and he'd been in the war. And he told me a story. He was with the graduating class of sailors at Annapolis. He graduated with the class, and that whole class was put on the, Arizona? Isn't that the one?
Yes.
It was,
Yes.
In Pearl Harbor?
it was sunk, and he lost all of his classmates on that ship. And the reason he wasn't part of it, he says he got sick, and they wouldn't let him go on that ship as a member of the crew. And he says he was so upset about that, but he said that saved his life.
All right. Well, as we kind of come to a close, we like to finish with the question. This is going to be part of the Library of Congress, and generations from now, until potentially forever, are going to be able to see this interview. Is there anything you would like to leave as a message for young people now and future generations?
I don't know. I hadn't given it any thought, but I would like to see young people and middle-aged people take life seriously and try to improve on living conditions, working conditions. It seems like even during the Great Depression, things were going better than they're going now. Within the government and within the workforces of the country. Yeah, I follow the news, and it's lamentable that we're in so many wars at the same time. It's just pitiful. Now, Russia is beefing up their defense, as are other countries, North Korea and Iran. And then to hear them talk about it, I'm not sure of the word, ISILs.
Yeah, that's right.
Say the word as you know it.
ISIS or ISIL, I think
Yeah.
they call it both.
I think I've heard it ended with an L. They have no mercy at all.
Yeah.
Beheading people it was done years ago with the guillotines, And in school, we used to almost make a joke of it. In grade school, it was Charles II was beheaded. Talked about how he lost his head. It ain't funny.
Yeah. Okay. Well, John Robert Beahm, on behalf of Parade Rest, and
Well, next time you see me, don't call me John, call me Robert.
Robert, yes, sir.
Or in the Army, my buddies call me JR.
JR, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate
Well, thank you. This hadn't hurt too much, but I feel like I should have been a little more ready.